خوزستان تنهای تنها شد، خوزستان از اشک این مردم دریا شد، دریا شد، دریا شد.
با درود خدمت شما همیهنان عزیزم هر جایی که هستید و امیدوارم همه سالم و خوب باشین. امروز روز 12 اعتراضات و تظاهرات های خوزستانه و همیهنانمون در جای جای ایران هم دارن میپیوندن. میدونید که خب اینترنت رو سلو کردن، برای همین ما فیلم و اینا کمتر داریم. تو برنامه آرش البته دیدم که یه دی تلفن تونستن که بزنن، بنابراین خب شاید توی تهران و اینا راحت‌تر بود. البته یکی دو تا هم از اصفهان و از خوزستان داشتن تلفن. خب هر روز در ایران تظاهراته. عده‌ای اومدن گفتن این تظاهراتی که آمدن اعلام کردن تظاهراتیه که دولت ممکنه بیاد و بگیره و اینا. ببینید اگه
see if we can, I don't know where you're going to plug it in though. We need an extension cord.
They lost me too.
Oh, okay. We're just trying to get the light, a light put on because it's going to get dark.
بهروز جان من چی شدم؟ Oh my god. I'm on the air ولی من تصویر خودم رو نمیبینم. خب من اوکی اومدم رو ادامه. ببخشید ما یه روز تکنیکال دیفیکالتی داریم. خب امیدوارم که این اعتراضات و اعتصابات همینطور ادامه پیدا بکنه. اعتصابات سنتی که میدونیم ادامه پیدا داره میکنه، ولی امیدوارم که همینطور ادامه پیدا کنه. امروز بعد از ظهر در اورنج کانتی تقاطع کالور مایکلسن جلوی هولسم چویس هموطنان ما اعتصاب آب خواهند کرد از 6 بعد از ظهر تا 6 صبح. من خودم هم از اونجا برنامه شبانه رو اجرا میکنم. امیدوارم با ما باشید. خب مهمان برنامه امروز من که همیشه خوشحالم با منه کنت تیمرمنه. هر زمانی که از کن میخوام، الان با وجود که تو سفره قبول میکنه و با ما هستش. Welcome to the show, Ken. I was just telling everybody, no matter where in the world you are, you always accept graciously to be my guest. I thank you and I'm glad you're here with us on this important day.
Thank you, Roxanne. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure you've heard of the 12-day protests going on starting from Khuzestan. Of course, before that, we had the strikes of different, the oil industry. Of course, the sugar has been going on. The sugarcane industry is going on for a long time, but then the oil industry, the petrochemical industry, the teachers, everybody. But now the protests in Khuzestan started for water shortages. The most basic right of any human being is, and actually there's a resolution 64-292 of the United Nations General Assembly that says that everybody has the right to water, clean water and sanitation. And this government, of course, which for the past 43 years has destroyed everything our country has had because they're really not Iranians. Instead of addressing this issue, has taken troops into Khuzestan and shooting on the people and scaring people for asking for their most basic rights in a time of pandemic when they haven't even been able to vaccinate the population. So what are your thoughts on that, and how have you seen this evolve? You've seen issues in Iran like this, but not this dire of a situation, I don't think.
Right. This is the most extraordinary set of demonstrations of protests we've seen in Iran really since 1979. It's bigger and more important in a way than those after the 2009 election. It's bigger than the ones that we've seen over the past couple of years. It's nationwide. It really is all across the country. And as you mentioned so well in your introduction, it's about basic human rights. It's not even political. It's not even, it does not start, I should say, as being a political protest against the regime, but as a cry of anguish for just basic sustenance, as you say, for water, for clean water. So it's really extraordinary, and to see this all over the country, I think is going to be a big challenge for the Basij and the Revolutionary Guard.
خب از آقای تیمرمن پرسیدم که چون آقای تیمرمن در این سالها همیشه مسائل ایران رو فالو کرده و از یه ایرانی بیشتر توجه کرده و حتی نیوزلترهای رو ایران داشته و اینا، از ایشون پرسیدم که خب این تظاهراتی که شروع شده در خوزستان برای چیز آب، کمبود آب، یعنی حق مردم هر کشوری، بیسیک ترین حقشون آب، نون، هوا و حتی مجمع عمومی سازمان ملل متحد یه قطعنامه 64292 رو گذارده که میگه آب آشامیدنی جزو حقوق ملت هاست. از آقای تیمرمن پرسیدم که آقای تیمرمن این تظاهرات رو شما چطور میبینید که مردم حقشون رو میخوان، به حق آب نوشیدنی میخوان و دولت اومده به اینا رو سرکوب میکنه. آقای تیمرمن میگه که بعد از 1979 انقلاب این یکی از بزرگترین تظاهراتایی که من دیدم، حتی از انتخابات 2009 و حتی از آبان ماه هم بزرگتره و مهمترین چیزش این است که فراگیر شده توی سراسر کشور و این یک حق سیاسی، تظاهرات سیاسی شروع نشد، میگه البته شروع نشد، یعنی الان شده. این برای حقوقشونه که آب خوردنه اومدن تظاهرات کردن و اگر که این تظاهرات همینطور ادامه پیدا کنه و گسترش پیدا کنه، بسیج و سپاه و اینا دیگه از دستشون در میره. Well, Ken, you're in Europe right now. Have you seen these demonstrations covered by the European media or not?
Not a great deal, and it's not being covered either very much by the Voice of America. I'm very distressed to see that. I'm distressed to see that the United States government, at the head of it, the White House, has not made a statement in support of the demonstrators. I'm really outraged to see the continued efforts by the Biden clique to negotiate a nuclear deal with this regime when they are in the midst of a revolution. Iranians understand where the revolution began. It began in the oil fields with the oil strikes in Khuzestan. Well, guess what? We're back to 1978 and the oil strikes in Khuzestan. I think this is going to be a very hard to stop movement.
خب از آقای تیمرمن پرسیدم، گفتم آقای شما که الان تو اروپا هستین، رسانه‌های اروپایی این تحولات ایران رو دنبال میکنن. میگه نه خیلی کم و خیلی برام عجیبه که حتی when you say VOA Farsi, right?
Well, I'm just looking at VOA. I'm not looking at Farsi right now. I'm just looking at the regular VOA, and they're not covered.
میگن که برام جای تعجبه که VOA Voice of America جنرال، یعنی همش، نه فقط مال فارسی، خیلی کم اینو کاور داره میکنه و از دولت امریکا خیلی جای تعجبه. آقای بایدن که توی این موقعیتی که مردم برای حقوقشون بلند شدن و چیزه هیچ صحبتی از کاخ سفید نیامده به حمایت مردم ایران و خیلی عجله دارن که برگردن به برجام تو موقعیتی که مردم دارن انقلاب میکنن در ایران. Well, it's ironic. It's the same with the Green Movement and Obama. He kept silent during the Green Movement. Absolutely silent. So we're not surprised by that. But the interesting thing, which I'm going to get to, is when Masih Alinejad interviewed with CNN, she complained, and Masih, not being a big Trump supporter or anything, actually her husband's very big, Biden supporter, was a very big Biden supporter. She complained that I'm a U.S. citizen and they were going to kidnap me, and I haven't heard anything from the White House. So that's when Tony Blinken called her, hearing it on CNN that she's telling the world that they haven't contact, but that was Blinken calling her, and she's constantly been out there saying that this is not about me. Now people are on the streets, but still we don't hear the media in the United States either covering this. And actually, like you said, it's more about the JCPOA, and even the French yesterday were encouraging the Iranians that if you don't get back on the negotiating table real fast, this is going to damage everything. So everybody's after the JCPOA. What about the Iranian people for the past 43 years, Ken? And I know you have been struggling with this. So what do we do now? Where do we stand? Where the media, which is supposed to be the voice of those who are voiceless, refuses for the past 43 years to address this issue when they couldn't stop talking about human rights abuses in Iran under the Shah, which we know was minuscule compared to the past 43 years. So what do we do with this irresponsible situation by the media, at least?
Well, the media situation has changed over the past 20 years, and far be it from me to be a fan of Twitter or of Instagram or Telegram or social media sites. I'm not, but they do provide an alternative for to the national medias in Europe or in the United States. And remember, Farsi is the second language on Instagram and on Telegram. Farsi is the second language. It's really extraordinary. So Iranians are very, very present in social media sites. And as far as I'm aware, and please correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I'm aware, the left-wing social media moguls here in the U.S. have not yet cracked down on Iranian protests, tweets or Instagram feeds or stuff like that. Now, that could happen. I'm looking at the VOA main page, and they have maybe one story a day about the water shortage, and then they'll have a story that says, this is the headline: Iran's Khamenei urges water protesters against falling prey to enemy. So Voice of America wants us to believe, and wants the world to believe, that the voice of the United States is concerned about one thing. Oh, the supreme leader, the legitimate leader of Iran, is warning his people not to fall prey to the enemy. In other words, us, the United States. This is outrageous. It's completely outrageous. And the people who are writing these headlines, who are writing these newscasts, should be fired. We tried to turn it around in the Trump administration. We failed. The president was set. I was actually working on this in the very first months of the Trump administration. And then once Steve Bannon got fired and Seb Gorka was left the White House, it just fell through the cracks.
I know. And then when they fired Setar Derakhsh, Biden rehired her. After all that scandal and all that they have on her, they rehire her with more money, which is ridiculous. خب آقای تیمرمن میگن که این خیلی جالبه. البته در اون تیکه قبل هم گفتن که انقلاب ایران از چاهای نفت، از چیزای نفت شروع شد و الان دوباره برگشتیم به 78 انقلاب ایران. درباره رسانه‌ها از آقای تیمرمن پرسیدم که رسانه‌های امریکا در زمان انقلاب زمان شاه که اینقدر حقوق بشر میکردن که اصلا نسبت به این 43 سال یک ذره نوک سوزنم مثل الان نبود، الان سکوت کردن. و آقای تیمرمن هم در این سالها خیلی کمک به ما ایرانیان کرده که صدامون رو برسونیم، ولی متاسفانه میگه که تو این 20 سال میدیا خیلی عوض شده. ولی با وجودی که خیلی طرفدار اینستاگرام و توییتر و تلگرام نیستن، میگن که از اینا خیلی خوب ایرانی‌ها دارن استفاده میکنن و زبان دوم توی اینستاگرام و تلگرام فارسیه. بنابراین ما ایرانی‌ها خیلی خوب از این حربه داریم استفاده میکنیم. امروز هم یه عده بچه‌ها در توییتر یه طوفان توییتری را انداختن برای جمهوری اسلامی که من روز توییترم دارم، اگه برید ریتوییت کنید خیلی خوشحال میشم. و میگن که از اینا باید استفاده کنیم و میگن که فعلا تا اونجایی که میدونم تو این کله گنده های توییتر و اینستاگرام درباره ایرانیا سرکوب نکردن این موومنتو. و جای تاسف مثلا میگن که وایس آف امریکا الان اومده هدلاین زده که آقای خامنه‌ای نگرانه و از کسانی که برای آب تظاهرات کردن میخواد که دست دشمنان نیفتن، یعنی دشمنان امریکا و لابد اسرائیل. و میگه که این توی رسانه امریکایی وایس آف امریکا دارن تایتل میزنن که خامنه‌ای رو به عنوان رهبر بزرگ ایران میشناسن و دارن میگن دست ما امریکایی‌ها نیفتین دشمن. و این جای تاسفه که امریکا یه همچین کاری داره میکنه. Well, Ken, what do you? I wanted to ask you. Talking about Masih Alinejad, since I remember during the Flag of Freedom days, you were very involved with all the terrors that were happening then, and after all the terrors that were happening in Europe against Iranians, such as Farrokhzad, Mazluman, Dr. Elahi, Bay Ahmadi, Qolizadeh, all of those people, and then before that, at the beginning of the revolution, with Oveisi, Shahryar Shafiq, Reza Fazeli, Son Bijan, a lot, Sharafkandi in Germany, the big Mykonos deal. You were involved in all of that. So we've seen it all back then. And then for a while we didn't see anything. And then the kidnapping started with Fuladvand. Then after Fuladvand, it was Kaviani. Then we had Ruhollah Azam just recently brutally taken to Iran and executed after a fake trial. And then Sharmat. And now we see a plot in the United States of America against Masih Alinejad that was going on apparently this thing for 8 months. And surprisingly, the FBI has wanted posters. I don't know how come they haven't been able to capture these people. They arrested 2 people, which one of them apparently is out on bail in Los Angeles. So we see this drama fall apart here. So we're not safe in the United States either. How do you see this development of us allowing, I mean, you know very well for the past so many years, we've been calling to the administrations and to FBI that these mosques that are mushrooming up in this country, these things that are happening, these people who come in, Trump was very smart about, people are going to get very upset at me, but the Muslim ban, as people call it, which was not really a Muslim ban, but unfortunately, most of these terrorists are Muslims. So that's what it's called.
No, they were all Muslims.
They were all Muslims. So he was saying, because we cannot vet these people, we have to be able to secure our borders, not to let the kinds of these people who kidnap us and want to take us to another country, to Venezuela, or they're right on our next door money laundering, or come to this country. And Trump was criticized for this. So I want to ask you, how is it that people don't realize the danger of this Islamic fundamentalism spreading to our backyard?
It's a very important question, and what happened to Masih Alinejad is very important as well. I can tell you she's not the only person who's being threatened by Iranian snatch teams, kidnapping teams. There are other activists in the United States. Some of them have come to me and have spoken to me about unusual things that they have seen. And if you are listening to us today and you have been approached by somebody that you think is suspicious, or you think is inviting you to some place where maybe they could get you alone, maybe they could get you into circumstances where they could kidnap you, and you suspect that they could be somehow working with the Islamic regime in Iran, you have to call the FBI. Call the FBI. They do actually have a team of people. And we saw this with Masih Alinejad. You saw they had the FBI the field office in New York. They had people in Washington, and they had people in the West Coast, all working on this. So they do have people that they task to help Iranian Americans and to protect Iranian Americans to discover these plots. But I can tell you right now, there will be more of them. There will be more of them. The Iranian regime is not deterred by a couple of indictments. They don't care if one of their agents gets indicted. They couldn't care less. It's the cost of doing business for them. They have changed their modus operandus. Very important people understand this. The days when they're going to assassinate exile political leaders in Europe, in Germany, in France, those days, I hope, are behind us for good, but they're at least behind us for now. What they're doing now is enticing those exile leaders or those exile media figures to get on a plane and to go someplace, or to kidnap them in their own country and put them on a boat or a plane or some other means of conveyance and get them out of the country and then to some safe ground like Cuba or Venezuela in the case of Masih, and then from there to get them to Iran, where they will kill them, because that's what they will do. They would have killed Masih Alinejad if they had gotten her to Iran. They would have killed all of these other people that they're stalking today. And they have networks inside the United States. It's not just Los Angeles. It's not just Washington.
All over.
They have people up in the state of Washington, in outside
Texas,
of Seattle and other places. They have people in Texas. And look, you know their networks, and you know how extensive their networks are when you see the polling places that they set up for the fake presidential selection, right? They set up, I forget how many it was this year, but in past years, they've had, 100 polling places.
And shame on them, shame on us for allowing that. Shame on us for allowing that. Canada didn't allow it.
It is illegal. It is violation of U.S. law. I have brought that up every single election with the FBI. Okay,
because they're not supposed to travel beyond 25-mile radius of the United Nations or the Pakistani whatever that they have. But here in Los Angeles, they have people acting as officials of the so-called embassy, which they call, that go around and they do passport work for them. They do conference call with the embassy. They renew stuff. So we're allowing this. I can't imagine that we don't know what this is going on. If Roxanne Ganji knows, if Ken knows, FBI knows, Yeah.
The only person who's been active against this is Ruzbe Farahanipour.
Very much.
In the Westwood City Council, where he actually had public hearings and got it banned for a while.
I was with him on those. Yeah, I was with him on those. So Ruzbe has done amazing work. I'm sorry that he doesn't come interview anymore, but Ruzbe has truly been the one activist who has stood up to the IRI and to NIAC in Los Angeles. I have to admit. خب از آقای تیمرمن پرسیدم که خب چجوریه که ما در دهه‌های 1980 و 90 دیدیم که افرادی رو مثل دکتر الهی، با احمدی، مظلومان، فرخزاد، قبلش اویسی، شهریار شفیق، قلیزاده در ترکیه و افرادی رو ترور کردن دیگه. جمهوری اسلامی میکونوس بود، همه اینا که به پسر فاضلی، همه اینا رو ترور کردن. بعد از ترورها اومدیم رسیدیم به آدم ربایی‌ها. فولادوند رو گول زدن بردن، کاویانی رو گول زدن بردن. بعد از شایان کاویانی آمدن روح الله زمان چند سال پیش بردن، با اون مسخره بازی ترورش کردن، اعدامش کردن. بعد آقای شارمت رو الان دزدیدن بردن به ایران، معلوم نیست اون چی میشه. حالا نوبت مسیح علی نژاد و مسیح علی نژاد رو تو خاک امریکا میخواستن این کارو بکنن و پرسیدم که چطوره که FBI که همه چی رو دنبال میکنه اجازه میداده تا اینجا اینا برسن که تو حیات خلوت ما باشن. و تیم من میگه که اینا دارن همه رو مواظبت میکنن و میدونن چه خبره و میگه که توی همه جا، فقط مسیح علی نژاد نبوده. آقای تیمرمن میدونه که کسان دیگه هم که تو اپوزیسیون هستن، از آدمایی که تو رسانه هستن تا اکتیویست ها، اینها هم در خطرن و یه چیز شوخی نیستش. برای که اگه شما رو بدزدن میبرنتون به کوبا، میبرنتون ونزوئلا، یه جایی میبرنتون، بعدم میبرنتون ایران، میکشنتون. مطمئنا اگه مسیرم برده بودن میکشتن. و آقای تیمرمن میگه اینا در جای جای امریکا لونه کردن، از ایالت واشنگتن تا تگزاس تا شیکاگو تا میزوری تا همه جا هستن. بنابراین اگر کسی شما رو تهدید میکنه یا فکر میکنید کسی با جمهوری اسلامی، آقای تیمرمن به شما میگه حتما با مقامات FBI شهر خودتون تماس بگیرید و نذارید. و بعد صحبت یادی کردیم از روزبه فرهانی‌پور که به جرئت میتونم بگم تنها کسیه که یک تنه توی سیتی کانسل وست‌وود با عوامل جمهوری اسلامی جنگید، موفق شد و نایک. Now coming to NIAC. Very interesting that NIACs, after President Trump pretty much cleaned them out of around the White House and around the State Department, there were a few left, but he pretty much closed the door. During the Obama presidency, Trita was in the White House 32 times during that administration. So during Trump administration, pretty much they were cleaned out. And I know because we complained about a few who were in the State Department and they were let go. Now they're all sitting back in high positions and they're actually campaigning for their individuals to be on local city councils, local senates, all this. And now all of a sudden with Raisi's election, there's a turnaround of the attitude of NIAC, which all of a sudden is boasting that they've been a human rights organization all these years. Ehsan Zahedani, in one of the clubhouse rooms that I attended last week, which Hassan Adai, thank God, was in that room, Ehsan Zahedani was claiming that they have a human rights sticker of who's being executed on their website. And he was saying that they even wrote a letter protecting Masih Alinejad, which Masih actually criticized NIAC for the first time, a few times lately, which I'm very glad she is now. So we see that the likes of NIAC and all of a sudden Elahe Hicks, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, she came and during this very critical time tweeted that the people on the streets of Iran are mujahideen and that people have to be wary of the mujahideen. So there's been a big uproar about this. And now all of a sudden she claims that she is the only human rights activist who's gone to Iran 6 times. And she has done all this human rights work. And why are people criticizing her? She was crying yesterday in a clubhouse room. And all of a sudden, all these people who had platforms, who could make a difference in the lives of the Iranians all these years in the platforms, in the NGOs that they represented Iranians, but they all stood by the reformists all this time. Now they're all revamping into human rights activists. So isn't it up to us all to remind them of who they were and what they have done all these years to protect this regime? What do you think about this?
Of course, and it's you're absolutely right in that recital of events. Look, Elahe Hicks, when she says she's been to Iran 6 times as a human rights activist, is simply lying through her teeth. You cannot go to Iran as a human rights activist. They will not allow you in. I actually made 2 efforts to go to Iran in the 1990s during Khatami's presidency. Had somebody who was close to Khatami who said, I can get you an invitation. And I said, okay, here are the people in jail that I want to visit. And I gave him a list of names. And of course, I never got the invitation. That's what you do as a human rights activist. You go to visit people in jail. You poke your finger in the eye of the regime when you're there, and you let them know that you are there, and you are there to watch them. Elahe Hicks doesn't go to Tehran to watch the regime or to poke them into the eye. She goes there probably to get a stipend. You know, she probably goes there to get help and aid from the regime in her career, one way or another. She uses it on her resume. I have been to Iran. I'm able to report from Iran. I can't report from Iran. Anybody who is critical of the Iranian regime,
says that she was there for the Jewish community, which I don't think.
What a crock. What a crock. Seriously.
So this is good that you're saying this, so people realize that if you really want to do human rights work, they will not let you in.
No, they will not let you in. Of course not.
خب آقای تیم، من پرسیدم که خب سازمان‌هایی مثل نایک که در این سالها فقط ببخشید من این لغت مالکشی جمهوری اسلامی رو واقعا کردن و آقای چویتابارسی تو تمام مذاکرات بغل دست آقای ظریف برای JCPOA برای برجام بوده و این سازمان هایی که در این سالها فقط عمر این رژیم رو زیاد کردن و افرادی مثل خانم الهه ایکس که در این موقعیت خطرناک میاد و میره توییت میکنه میگه که مجاهدین خلقن که تو خیابان ایرانن، تو خوزستانن و جون اینا که دارن مبارزه میکنن و در خطر میندازه با این استیتمنتش که بعد البته از سرش رفت پاک کرد. حالا میان و میگن ما طرفدارای حقوق بشریم و فعالین حقوق بشری بودیم. هم نایک حالا شده فعالین حقوق بشری، ما بهشون بدهکار شدیم. هم خانم الهه ایکس میگه من 6 دفعه برای کار حقوق بشری رفتم ایران. آقای تیمرمن میگه خانم الهه ایکس داره دروغ میگه. من در سال 1990 از طریق یکی از دستیارای آقای خاتمی خواست به من گفتن میتونن درست کنم من برم ایران. من یک لیستی نوشتم که اسم زندانی های سیاسی که میخوام برم وضعیتشون رو تو زندان ببینم و این لیست رو دادم به اون آقا، گفتم من اگه میام ایران میخوام وضعیت این زندانیا رو در زندانها برم بررسی کنم. من رو ندادن. خانم الایکس که میگه 6 دفعه رفته ایران، اگه واقعا کار حقوق بشری کرده محال بود میکرد این رو نمیدادن. این میره که رو رزومه خودش اینو بذاره، وقتی میاد خارج به بهانه که من کار حقوق بشری میکنم بره تو این جایی که کار گرفته و بودجه بگیره و برای کار خودش و برای پول خودش و موقعیت خودش این کار کرده، نه برای ملت ایران. خب ما باید دست این افراد رو کنیم و میدونید من فکر میکنم که واقعا در این زمان ما باید که این کارو بکنیم. So this issue of the lobby is actually a big issue for us as activists. For the past 43 years, we haven't, Ken. And you've been very involved with this. I know that you tried when you were working close with the Prince Reza Pahlavi, then with Ruzbe and everybody, to have a voice, a lobby for the freedom movement in Iran. But we haven't been able to do that. Do you think it's a policy not to allow us to gather a lobby of the activists of the freedom fight, movement in Iran? Is there something that the U.S. government is prohibiting us from doing but allowing them to do? Or is it because of our own inaptitude that we haven't been able to get together and create such an organization?
I'm not aware of any effort by the U.S. government to prevent an authentic Iranian-American lobby, a group that actually represented the viewpoint of Iranian Americans rather than pretending to, as MIAC does. No, I think the problem has always been, and you mentioned, I've been involved in this for many, many years, and I've tried to help people to establish some form of umbrella organization where they could all Iranians don't want to contribute money. They don't want to contribute money. They don't want somebody else to be in charge. They don't want a committee to be in charge. They don't want a spokesman who is not themselves. They all want to be Shah. And it's, God bless them. God bless them, but it doesn't work. It does not work like that. Look at the Jewish community. Look at AIPAC, which is a very, very successful lobbying organization. Mm-hmm. Look at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. The Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles has 600,000 members. 600,000 members.
Contributing members.
Contributing members to give. Now they don't all give a lot of money, but they give some. Yeah,
a dollar a person is $600,000.
$600,000. Well, they give more than that.
Yeah, but I mean, even if it's $1 a person, it's $600,000.
It's more than that. The average is probably around $50. So they have 600,000 people. Where's the Iranian American organization with 20,000 members? With 20,000.
This is a very good point, and this is a very important issue right now.
But I think Roxanne, it's a question of
it's a cultural flaw.
Iranian Americans do not want to organize politically because they don't trust each other. And they don't trust whoever it might be who's going to speak for them.
An example is Shahram Hamayun's TV station. He has to, there's a dedicated membership that pays, $5, $100, $50 for him to be able to carry the voice. But most people don't, And this is the only place that is funded by the community. And they call him names for selling flags and selling stuff to be able to survive. That's a cultural thing. But they don't ask the other TV stations where you get your funding. Let me translate this. This is a very important issue I'd like to tell my compatriots about. آقای تیمرمن من شاهد بودم. I've been a witness to all that you've done. من شاهد بودم آقای تیمرمن از بغل دست شاهزاده رضا پهلوی تا تمام گروه‌های جمهوری خواه، مشروطه خواه، سلطنت طلب فعالیت کرده، نیوزلتر درست کرد، سعی کرد که ما رو یه لابی کمک کنه که درست کنیم تو واشنگتن که نداریم. من ازش پرسیدم اگر که ممکنه به من بگین دولت امریکاست که نمیذاره ما آزادی خواه لابی درست کنیم یا خودمونه، این بی‌لیاقتی خودمونه که نتونستیم. آقای تیمرمن من خیلی رکه گفت من اصلا نمیبینم که دولت امریکا جلوی این موضوع رو گرفته باشه. این موضوع من خیلی سعی کردم، این موضوع یه چیز فرهنگی خود شما هاست. شما نمیخوان پول بدن ایرونیا، اگه پولم بدن میخوان همه رئیس بشن، همشون شاه بشن، همشون وزیر بشن، به هیچ کی هم اطمینان ندارید، کار گروهی هم نمیتونن با هم دیگه بکنن. بنابراین من سعی کردم ولی نشده و این به خاطر خودتونه، برای که ما همدیگه نمیتونین همکاری کنیم و اتحاد داشته باشید. این مسئله خیلی مهم فرهنگیه که ما دربارش صحبت کردیم. این تلویزیون اگزمپل خیلی خیلی خوبی از این مسئله. میگن ایپک رو نگاه کنین که لابی اسرائیلیاست. اسرائیل مملکت کوچیکه ولی قدرتش رو در دنیا نگاه کنین، سازندگیش رو تو مملکت خودش نگاه کنین. الان انقدر قشنگ مردمش رو واکسینه کرده که 2 میلیون چقدر هم تازه واکسن اضافه آورده که میخواد بفروشه. میگه سایمون ویزنتال سنتر تو لس آنجلس که یه سنتر یهودیه که موزه هولوکاست هم توشه، میگه آقای تیمرمن میگه 600,000 عضو داره. 600,000. من گفتم اگه نفری $1 هم در سال بدن، سالی $600,000 اینا پول دارن. آقای تیمرمن میگه نه اونا بیشتر میدن، حالا اوریج بگی نفری $50 میدن که بعضیشون خیلی بیشتر هم میدن. بنابراین میگه شما یه سازمانی به من نشون بدین که 20,000 ایرانی عضو داشته باشه. نداریم هموطنانا. 43 سال ما تو سر کله هم زدیم. بعد امروز که به اینجا رسیدیم رهبری نداریم. Today this is a very important question that my compatriots from Iran ask us when they call. They're like, okay, we've come out on the streets now. Soon it's going to be a big demonstration. What is next? Where's the leadership of this movement? I'm hoping there's leadership inside Iran, which is probably the proper thing to do. But before they saw leadership with Khomeini, unfortunately, he would send his cassettes in, he would direct them what to do. This movement has started as a grassroots movement, which is great, but they're right. What is the light at the end of this tunnel? And it's because for 43 years, we, inside and out, have not connected and worked together. Ken, what do you think is the light at the end of the tunnel for the Iranians at this point? They're coming out. What is next?
Well, right now, at the rate things are going, chaos is next. And that's not necessarily a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just the result. It's what's going to happen. I don't think the regime is going to be able to contain these protests as they spread all across the country. I think they can contain them if they're small and localized, but as they get bigger and as they become simultaneous and as they spread, it's going to be very difficult. And bit by bit, Iranians are going to learn how to counter the regime forces as well. I'll give you an example. You have the Basij who charge the crowds on motorcycles. They'll come in with 200 motorcycles charging the crowds. But what would happen if, as they were coming in, people had big sticks or they had chains and they threw them into the spokes of the motorcycle wheels? It's not violent. They're not attacking them. They're not using weapons. But all of a sudden, the Basij are on the ground, and they're no longer dominating the situation. There are many ways that people can respond non-violently, and I think that they will learn this as they're going on. But I don't see a great future for the regime. I think the regime is in big trouble. Even when you have even the UN Human Rights Rapporteur issue a statement about the regime using violence against protesters, the United Nations criticizing Iran, that's a relatively big deal. The UN has usually been the Iranian regime's best friend. So I think the light at the end of the tunnel right now is chaos. It's the collapse of order, and eventually, I think, defections from inside the security forces. And your leadership may come from surprising places. It may not come from the streets. It may not come from people here in the United States. It may come from people who've been inside the regime and who've now had it. They're fed up and they see an end. They see an actual end to the regime and they come out from where they've been hiding for the past 40 years.
خب از آقای تیران پرسیدم که هموطنان ما از داخل ایران که زنگ میزنن خیلی سوال میکنن که حالا چی میشه؟ کی قراره بیاد؟ ما اومدیم تو خیابون، گفتین ما اومدیم دیگه، ما تو خیابونیم، آخرش چی میشه؟ زمان خمینی رهبری میکرد، کاست میداد اینا. آقای تیران میگه نتیجه این که الان داره اتفاق میفته اول هرج و مرجه، یعنی پله به پله رفت جلو. آقای تیرمن میگه که رژیم نمیتونه، برای که الان دارن همینطور میان بیرون و داره بیشتر میشه و در جای جای ایران دارن به هم میپیوندن. رژیم بعد از یه مدت نمیتونه همه اینو کنترل کنه. تظاهرات‌های کوچیکو میتونه کنترل کنه، ولی وقتی اینجوری بزرگ میشه و تمام ایرانو برمیگیره نمیتونن رژیم کنترل کنه. آقای تیمرمن میگه مثلا یه نمونه بهتون میدم، مثلا بسیج با موتورسیکلت میاد حمله میکنه به مردم میتونن چوب دستشون بگیرن یا زنجیر یا هر چیزی که این موتور بندازن زیر این موتورسیکلت که این موتورسیکلت ها لیز بخورن زمین. بعد دیگه بسیجی که خورده زمین که دیگه هم موقع نمیتونه بلنشه شما رو کتک بزنه. این هم نافرمانی مدنیه، چیز نه تیر زدین نه تفنگ زدین، یه کاری بکنین که اون بسیجی ها موتوراشون لیز بخورن زمین، نتونن حمله بکنن. و این اتفاقات خواهد افتاد. مردم حربه‌های جدید یاد میگیرن و رژیم الان در ضعیف‌ترین موقعیتشه، برای که خودش میدونه که چقدر وضع خراب شده. و وقتی که سازمان ملل که معمولاً بهترین دوست جمهوری اسلامی بوده بیاد و از ایران ایراد بگیره، این نشون دهنده این نیست که دولت جمهوری اسلامی واقعا به ته خط رسیده. و میگن رهبری چیز نیستش که حتما از خارج بیاد یا مثلا یکی از تو مردم کف خیابون بیاد. یه دفعه میبینین یه کسایی توی خود همین رژیم بودن که خیلی وقت مخالف این رژیم بودن و دیگه به جونشون رسیده و مثلا یه دفعه سر بلند میکنن و تصمیم میگیرن که دیگه باید یه کاری کنن این رژیم بره. بنابراین میگن رهبری به احتمال قوی از خود داخل ایران میاد، از جای مختلف. Well, I was very shocked that Reuters actually wrote that Khamenei has said that people have every right to be upset in Khuzestan, and now they've shut down in I think 10 days. Raisi is going to be sworn in. On the day of the swearing in, they've shut down all the airports in Tehran, which they didn't do during the Ukrainian flight that went down. During those rockets, they didn't shut down the airports, which caused all of our young kids to die. But now they're shutting down because they're scared. They're scared of who comes in and who goes out. So they are scared, and I think they do realize that this is the boiling point for them.
When I talk about the people coming from inside of the regime, perhaps,
okay,
I'm not talking about reformists.
Okay.
There's no, let me be very, very clear about that. I'm not talking about some kind of reform movement. There's no reforming this regime.
Exactly.
And there's no way this regime can be reformed. And I think the protest movement has gone so far that
they're done. People showed by the voting that, it's gone done.
Anybody who stood up in Tehran and said, oh, we can reform the regime, we can do this, we can do that, they would be not just laughed off the podium, they would be run off the streets. Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about reformists. I'm talking about people who have perhaps not played a political role. People who've been, inside as as technocrats or have been working, in companies, but have stayed alive during the time of the regime,
right?
And who know how to get things done, and who do not have the leadership issues that we have in the exile community, for example. So they understood how the Islamic regime has been very successful with leadership. They have been very successful with leadership. That's why they're still there. Mm-hmm. They know how to fight with each other and yet to stay together.
Mm-hmm. Right? Which we don't.
They fight with each other and yet they stay together. And that's something that people inside Iran have witnessed for the past 40 years, and those in exile have not. And that's a very different thing from talking about reformists.
آقای تیمرمن میگه من میخوام خیلی روشن بگم که وقتی میگم یه کسی از داخل خود ایران بلند میشه، منظورم اصلا اصلاح طلبا نیست. اصلاح طلبا اصلاحات نشون داده که اصلا کار نمیکنه در این سالها و اصلاح طلبا هم دیگه الان فهمیدن اگه فردا برن بگن ما میخوایم اصلاح کنیم، مردم بهشون دیگه میخندن. خب انتخابات امسال دیدیم دیگه، اصلاح طلبا دیگه تمام شدن. میگن که من منظورم تکنوکراتایی که خب تو ایران کار میکنن و خب زندگی کردن و اونها متوجه میشن که جمهوری اسلامی با تمام عیبی که داره با هم دعوا میکنن، میجنگن، ولی با هم اتحاد دارن. در خارج ما اینو نداریم، ما با هم میجنگیم ولی اتحاد هم نداریم، پشت هم خنجر میزنیم، برای این موفق نیستیم. میگه اون تکنوکرات اینو از اینا یاد گرفته، ولی ویژن داره برای آزادی ایران و توی دولت هم نبوده نسسرلی، کسی بوده که داره کار میکنه تو ایران. خیلی از آدمای وطن پرست هم مجبورن اونجا برن کار کنن، مجبورن نون در بیارن یا زندگی کنن که جزء رژیم هم نبودن. آقای تیمرمن میگه یکی از اونا من میبینم شاید یه روزی بلند بشه، یه کسی که به رژیم ربطی نداشته، یه کسی که در اونجا زندگی میکنه ولی در ضمن هم خوب و بد اینا رو دیده، میتونه بیاد و چیز بکنه. So any final, because I think we only have about 3 minutes left, any final statements for the Iranian people? I'm really, Ken, I mean, I really appreciate everything you do and have done. I've witnessed it all these years.
No,
I hope that President Trump comes back in 2024, because with this administration, we're out of luck.
Well, he may be back beforehand. It depends what happens with the audits, but we'll see. We shall see.
Well, this is an interesting question I wanted to ask you. I was watching this morning this show going on TV, and it's amazing that they didn't allow the Republican Party to choose their own. Pelosi really acted dirty, and shame on Cheney and what's his name for accepting to go play this game. Sure. Adam Kinzinger to play this game. I'm so just disgusted by the way this thing is playing on the media. I mean, nobody is belittling what happened on the 6th of January.
I can about the Iranian regime and what's happening inside. What I think you're going to see is the mothership dying. The mothership is going to explode from inside and will die, will wither away. And then you have all these tentacles outside in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, that were being run by the mothership, but now the mothership is dead. So I think that the regime has just extended itself way beyond what it's able to sustain. And these protests, as they strike the very heart of the regime inside Iran, are going to separate all those tentacles, all those external follies from the mothership, and the whole thing is going to collapse.
And the tentacles will die eventually, right? Hopefully.
Because they will be cut off from the mothership.
خب آقای تیمرمن میگه که بذار درباره ایران حرف بزنیم، چون داشتیم درباره ریپابلیکن ها و دموکرات حرف بزنیم. میگه بذار درباره ایران بگیم. این مادرشیپ که مثل یه اختاپوسیه که دستای مختلف داره، میگن این وسطش داره میره، از بین میره. دستهاش توی لبنان و عراق و سوریه و اینجایی که جمهوری اسلامی پول داده میمونه، ولی وقتی که این مادرشیپ، این قایق اصلی، این وسط اصلی از بین بره، خواه ناخواه اونا هم از بین میرن و خیلی نزدیکه که این completely از بین بره. Well, that will be the day that the world has to celebrate, because the threat of Islamic fundamentalism and what's happened the past 43 years in an area that was so stable during the Shah. Whatever they say about the Shah, that area was so stable.
There have been protests in Iraq for the past 4 months. Hundreds of thousands of people
against IRI
protesting the Iranian occupation.
In Lebanon too. We've had demonstrations in Lebanon.
And the State Department of the United States of America said, oh, we're giving aid to the people of Iraq. No, you're not. You're giving aid to the Iranian-controlled regime in Iraq. Again, disgraceful. A disgraceful misplacement of trust.
Okay, so آقای تیمرمن میگن که در عراق مردم 4 ماه دارن بر علیه جمهوری اسلامی تظاهرات میگذارن اگه نمیخوایم ما کمک از ایران، و گفتم در لبنان هم همینطور تظاهرات هست. و آقای تیمرمن میگه که و دولت امریکا میگه بله ما داریم به مردم عراق کمک کنیم. نه، شما به مردم عراق کمک نمیکنید، خجالت بکشید. شما دارین به دولت جمهوری اسلامی کمک میکنید و واقعا خجالت آوره. Ken, there's a message here that Mrs. Patty wanted me to read to you on YouTube. She says, Ms. Ganji, could you please forward my message to Mr. Timmerman? I thank you for the time you put here to help Iranians to reach their goal. You are right. It is a cultural thing. Most Iranians would like to spend money just for themselves, and which is a shame. So anyway, Ken, I really appreciate you being with me, and I know that we're going to be together a lot more because things in Iran are just escalating, and hopefully we will be able to celebrate. And I myself will invite you to Iran to celebrate the freedom of Iran together.
Well, good. You know, my next book is going to be called Hane Iran.
خانه ایران. Wow, that's great. آقای تیمور میگه که بهش گفتم من خودم دعوتت میکنم به ایران و میگه کتاب بعدی من اسمش هست خانه ایران. Ken, your Benghazi book, I go through it all the time and it's such a shame that people don't read that book. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people should go read that book and see what people are capable of.
Go to my website, kentimmerman.com, and you can find those books there. Many of them are in Kindle or in ebook format.
آقای تیمرمن دو کتاب عالی داره که من خیلی دوست دارم. که الکشن هایستشه، یکم کتاب بنغازی درباره بی‌لیاقتی خانم کلینتون و ادمنستریشن آقای اوباما و میگه که بریم به kentimmerman.com این کتابا رو تهیه کنیم. من واقعا فکر کنم باید بریم بخونیم کسایی که انگلیسی میخونین. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a safe trip and see you back home soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. خب دوستان خیلی ممنون از آرش و بهروز تشکر میکنم. تظاهرات اورنج کانتی امشب ساعت 6 شب تا 6 صبح جلوی هولسن چویس در تقاطع کالور مایکلسن ساعت 6 بعد از ظهر. با من پیشنت باشید از اونجا که خواهم با شما برنامه اجرا کنم، چون طبیعتا من با یه دوربین دستی هستم، نور ممکنه خوب نباشه، صدا خوب نباشه، ولی اقلا میبینید که هموطنانمون در داخل میبینن که هموطنان اینجا به فکرشون هستن. با کسایی که اونجا هستن صحبت خواهم کرد. فکر کنم خانم زینا تهرانی با من باشن. ما یه اتفاقی براشون افتاده که هنوز مطمئن نیستم بتونن باشن، ولی اگه باشن در کنار خانم تهرانی از اونجا ساعت 7 شب با شما خواهیم بود. خیلی ممنونم از اینکه با من بودید. آرش و بهروز عزیزم مثل همیشه ازتون تشکر میکنم. بدرود بهتون میگم تا امشب. شب